On today's episode, I am going to be speaking with writer-producer Jay Moriarty. He has a book out. It's called Honky in the House. It's about his time working on the hit TV series, The Jeffersons. We're going to hear all about his background, what made him come out to LA with no contacts, how he found himself working on a show with Norman Lear, among others. All about his entire journey. I think if you're a writer, you're a budding writer, you're someone that's just a fan of television, this is a great story. I can't wait to share it with you. And here we are with Jay Moriarty. No, for USC, I was curious about that as well. And I was going to ask you, like, for these, maybe this team that you helped sort of guide, or just any students you had over your decade or so there, like, what do you think, like, the biggest misconception is for kids coming to LA saying, I want to break into the biz? Some of them might think, oh, I just need to meet the right person, or I need to have a short film, right? Or maybe some of them think it's just easier said than done. I don't know. What do you sort of in your time felt the biggest misconception is with these students, and how do you sort of set them straight and bring them back to reality?
What you have to do, I could speak from comedies. That's where I come from. If you can write something funny. If you can write something that somebody's will read and laugh, that's what you want to do. You can do it in 5 pages. You can do it, write a whole script. That's great. But you've got to write something funny. It's not about, what it's not about is who you know and that kind of thing. And you say, well, I got to meet this. That's good if you meet that person. But eventually, you got to be able to show that person or somebody, if this is what you want to do. If you want to write comedy for a living, you're going to have to be able to write something funny. If you find somebody who you can write with, and two of you laugh and two of you can write something funny together, that's it. Now, the drama thing's a whole other ball of wax. But basically, in story, like, once I got producing a show, in the 5th season of Jeffersons, I think Mike and I started producing, and then after that, I was an exec producer. And I would read, even when we were story editors, we have a pile of scripts from agents, who wanted the job. And so the first thing I would look for 2 things whenever I read a spec script. And I tell students this, story and jokes. And, say, if I ask students what's the most important, who thinks jokes are the most important? Well, hands go up. And then if somebody raises
story,
and then I know that person understands. Story is the most important thing. You got to have a story. You got to have compare story and jokes to clothesline and clothespins. Story is the clothesline. And if you don't have a clothesline, those clothespins are useless, the jokes. But that's what I look for both in a script. However, if it's a comedy and I'm picking up a comedy script, if I'm on Jeffersons, I'll get MASH scripts and, shows that were on the air, Maritime War. If I'm not laughing the first couple of pages, then put it down. I mean, it's I got to see that the writer knows funny, but I also got to see if I find somebody who knows story and jokes. That's the person I say, I want to meet with this person. Pitch me a story. If it's a good one, we'll send you out an assignment. You write we'll work with you, but we'll tell you what you do for a story assignment on a show is first you write it's a story outline, basically a narrative, like a 5 to 8 page narrative of what the episode would be if you're writing episodes. And then you write a first draft and a second draft, but you're getting notes each time. So that's another thing students don't realize is young writers. It's like they just think whatever they write, then they take it and shoot it. Well, it doesn't work that way. You got to get. I've always thought that, like at SC, they ought to teach class just on how to take notes. I mean, notes from who's ever running the show are like orders in the Army. They're not like just suggestions. These are things you've got to be able to take notes. You can't say, well, I wrote it this way, and I think it should go this way. Well, you won't be there very long. So, but eventually, if you care about your material, then you want to be the person who gives the notes eventually, and that can happen. I mean, it happened in our case, but But yeah, the misconception is that it's a big misconception from students coming out of a school like USC Film School is that they're going to get hired right away as a job. And I can't tell you how many calls I get, Professor, I can't get a job, I've been out of school 6 months and welcome to the real world. That's a misconception. So you want to write comedy or write something funny? Two guys, I write about in the book. Mike and I think one of the things we did really well is identify talent. And guys that we hired and never as first credits, and I'll give you two names, for instance, Peter Casey and David Lee, they would do what I said, they would write, they were both working, I think, for Movable Feast at the time, they're bringing sandwiches around, but anyway, you could tell they were good, they were smart. We read a Barney Miller script, met with them, gave them an assignment, hired them on the Jeffersons was their first job. They ended up writing on Jeffersons for 6 years, and they ended up writing on Cheers and producing Cheers and creating Wings and creating Frasier. And if you watch Frasier, you'll know the names Casey and Lee, and they won Emmys for Frasier. Won 5 years in a row, won Best Comedy Series. That's and they wrote stuff that was funny and made sense. If you
a
can
good
get
story,
a solid story. And for me, I always look, if you'd be surprised how many so-called writers or freelance writers just, we get like Jefferson scripts. It'd be like, a big fan. Agents would call. Big fan of Jefferson's, wrote a script. Okay, send it over, and it'd be like, what show were they watching? The common mistake was writing George like an obnoxious guy that hated everybody and fat jokes on Louise and Tom Willis, the Honky guy, not really getting the show. But one thing advice you can give to writers is when you write a spec script, don't send it to the show that it is. Send it to, if I'm writing the Jeffersons, don't send me Jefferson's script because I'll be overly critical because I know the show too well, but send me a MASH script, send me a Barney Miller, send me, whatever the shows are today. Now today it's a little, I don't know, Netflix and all these shows, a lot of limited series, and even like Ted Lasso or something, you have to kind of know the arc, in the era that I was talking about with Norman Lear, you pretty much are writing separate stories, which is great in syndication because you can just mix them up all you want. Like if you're doing Ted Lasso, pretty much one's got to follow the next one, doesn't it? And it's a little different but you got to write something to show that you can write. I mean, you got to have a sample. When I call a spec script, means you write it on speculation. You don't ever intend to sell it. You don't ever intend to get it made or anything. It's your calling card. It's your portfolio. And what I tell students is you wrote a great first spec script. Now, first thing you want to do is write a second one. So you write two. If you have two really good scripts, you're in good shape because the first thing somebody's going to ask you, an agent, but you're going to try to use your script to get an agent. And if they read something good, they'll say, what else you got? And you don't want to say, well, that's all. You want to say, then the agent knows this person writes, this person's prolific. They have two spec scripts. They want to do this. It's not just something they want to write and say, hey, like singing. Maybe if I sing this song, it'll be a hit and I'll make $1 million. What other songs you sing? Well, that's all. I just like singing that song right now.
Exactly. Yeah. So, well, since you brought that up with streaming, with social media, YouTube, do you see this classic sitcom format like holding its ground, or do you think things are going to be shifting to this whole new sort of direction, like you're saying, Apple TV or whatever?
Well, I think things definitely shift, and it's like climate change. I mean, you can't stop comedy shifts. What's funny shifts, but I think there will always be comedy. So the trick is just like, I don't know if you saw Barbie, or I just saw Barbie recently. So different things are funny to different generations even, different things are funny to different, like you watch British comedy, not everybody understands Monty Python, or it's just different. But it's good. If, whatever makes people laugh, I think it'll be a little different. Like what Norman did was do the shows in front of a live audience. And that's basically what Lucy did. And that, to me, is the favorite way of doing comedy. I really get spoiled doing it in front of a live audience because, to me, doing a single camera show is not something I want to even do. It's so nice to be able to write and know that you're going to be able to test your material in front of a live audience. And when you hear them laughing, that's, I think you had asked at one point about the rush or what are some great stories behind the scenes. Behind the scenes, it's all work. You're working hard. Whether you're an actor, you're a writer, you're focused on what the play is that you're doing this week and portraying your character or writing the script. But the two rushes really that come. One is the table read. So once the script's written, and then the actors have no idea, they show up for a cold reading, and that they play their characters. So now you hear the script in the mouths of the characters, and everybody's usually, especially on our show, the Jeffersons, everybody was just pulling for everybody, and we had good material and a good actress, and it'd be fun. Everybody's laughing. The table read was great, and then the tape night. Tape night that's the rush because people are laughing. That's what you're writing. Single camera, you don't hear people. You're shooting that, and there's no audience, and they're shooting these two scenes out of sequence one day, and some second AD's off shooting that, and it's like, I just spoil because like even when I was teaching at SC, well, we did a show in front of a live audience, so they get to see, and you can see what doesn't work. So that's why when we did Norman Lear shows, you did a show at 5 and the same show at 8, so you did 2 shows. If something doesn't work, doesn't get a laugh that you thought would in the first show, you can change the joke for the 8 o'clock show. So, and then you cut the 2 together, and that's your show that's going to air. But that was always
okay.
That was always the good stuff. I mean, the good times.
So it kind of sounds like almost like musical in a way, where you'd have a band that comes up with this song, they rehearse it, they all get together in a room, play it, and then they get to go and test that in front of the audience and get that reaction, and then they get to play it again the next night and feed off of.
Or hear it on radio and see if people go buy it or something.
Yeah, exactly. So you have that sort of yours was like sort of an instant gratification, but I get what you're saying. It makes sense when you are shooting chronological versus. These, like you said, this day you're doing this scene, and
it's like a play. A play is what we did. Norman would literally call it a play. He would talk about the play and it was a play. Because we can think about a person wrote four off-Broadway plays or something nobody really saw, but they wrote these 4. Well, that's great. I mean, I've written 400 plays. I mean, you write these plays. We did 20 in those days. You did 24 shows a season, but. In a play, like you say, you show it in sequence, and we would mask off if there was like a doctor scene coming up, and the audience arrives. Well, we masked that so they couldn't, see what was behind it until the time in the story when it came that you had to show up going to the doctor, and we never introduced the day players before the show. We had introduced the regular cast, but we didn't show them. Like in a show, we had Billy Dee Williams, who was a guest. On the show, we don't show them at the beginning. You introduce. So we treat it like a play like that. The audience learns as you go along what's going to happen. That was interesting.
Billy Dee Williams.
But Billy Dee Williams was in, and so we had a running gag on the show where Florence was crazy about Billy Dee Williams. She was the love interest. He was a real matinee idol then. And I remember saying, why don't we get Billy Dee on the show? And everybody said, he can't. He's not going to do the show. Anyway, long story short, once we got producing, then I put my producing hat on. I said, let's see if we can get Billy Dee. We got him. But I always remember you talk about, what goes on in the set. Basically, I love to just sit in the audience and watch the show. There's a booth. My partner would usually be in the booth, and I just like to watch the people laugh. And if I had a thought or something, I could run in the booth and tell them. But with Billy Dee, I happened to be backstage with him when he was getting ready to go on, And he would call, like, my partner and I by our last names, Milligan or Moriarty. He turns to me and he says, Moriarty, I'm nervous. And I said, what do you mean you're nervous? He says, you're a movie star. And he says, but I never played myself before. Who is this guy? And it's interesting from an acting point of view, when actors never played, they kind of know, even though, so all of a sudden he's cue and he's there at the door, and of course as soon as he stuck his head in the door, he knew who he was, and the audience reminded him who he was, and the show ended up going great. It was where he's actually from Harlem too, which worked perfectly. So it was a story where George needs a special guest at the boys club thing, and Billy's in town. He sees, so he thinks he can get Billy Dee to, but then he can't get a hold of him. It looks like he's not going to get him. So he talks to Ralph, the doorman, about getting a lookalike, and then Florence hears that he's trying to get a lookalike from Ralph. So she thinks he's getting, and when real Billy Dee shows up, she thinks that Billy Dee's a lookalike, and she's making fun of him and everything. And it actually is a very funny show. But
so it sounds like a good, like the set though itself. I know you talk in the book, Honky in the House, about Sherman seemed to be a very laid back, friendly, just kind of happy-go-lucky guy, right?
Yeah.
In person, right? Yeah.
He was a totally different guy on George Jefferson. That's why I thought he was such a great actor, because he was just a sweet guy. And when we started on the show, Mike and I, Sherman would come and sleep on our couch, and he identified with like the lowest people on the totem pole. I mean, that's who he would gravitate toward. So he was, if his driver wanted to find him, whatever, they come look on our office. Sherman, he wore a T-shirt and sneakers and jeans, and that's about it. He would come to work in a white T-shirt, jeans, sneakers. Didn't drive at all. He's from back east, so they had a driver for him. But he was. Another thing I mentioned in the book, when I first met Sherman, one of the first shows we break between shows. You had 5 o'clock, 8 o'clock, you had dinner between. Sherman would first make a plate of food and take it down to the security guard. I mean, it's like, how do you not like a guy like that? He just was identified, like I say, with the lowest people on the totem pole. And it's always interesting with Sherman. Then we went to Hawaii. That was interesting. Sherman's just such an innocent guy. We put one of the stage managers said, your job is just to stay with Sherman. Know where Sherman is at all times, which turned out to be one of our best decisions. This guy just hung with Sherman, buddy. Where's Sherman? Where's Sherman? I don't know what we call it. We're up in the mountains there. He met some locals, and they wanted to show Sherman this farm up there, and so I'm up here now, and said, well, we're going to need you to shoot here, so it's stuff like that. But and that's in the book too. So. In fact, talking about Sherman, when Mike and I, Sherman, on the day he coming in on a plane, so Mike and I said, we're going to go to the airport and meet Sherman. And Sherman was there, and hey, Sherman, how you doing? Let's go get your luggage. And he says, what luggage? So what, you didn't bring any luggage? Just white shirt, T-shirt, and his jeans, and well, you didn't bring a toothbrush? You didn't bring anything. So he was like a ward of the court. Fortunately, our wardrobe person was there, and that was Sherman.
Wow. Yeah, he seemed like a very cool guy.
Yeah, he was a wonderful guy to work for. Never complained about anything, and just really, was always. And Isabelle was terrific too. I mean, Isabelle was really the grounded part of the show. I mean, the stories and everything. If you didn't have Louise Jefferson, you really tough to do stories. But because she grounded the whole show. We called her the Queen, and Sherman. We introduced her last as a star. Sherman was a very humble guy, very generous actor, and I can't say enough good things. And I've learned since then that we were spoiled with such a great cast and such a because I've worked on shows where it's not all that easy, with the actors and always embracing the material and trying to make things work. And they were great. The show that we worked on 40 years ago in the 70s and 80s is now running on Antenna TV, and you can see these shows. During the pandemic, the book, one of the actors who played Marcus on the show is still around, and he does a commercial for the book when we run it on Antenna TV, and all these fans are still alive, especially during the pandemic. I think that people wanted to watch something that made them forget the pandemic and, that they laughed at it all. But it's interesting to see, though, that you can still turn on television and watch the Jeffersons, and they're doing that kind of with all these old shows now because they need material. There's so many channels now.
Yeah. The content is everywhere.
But you have the best thing. The focus. You ask a question that I'd love to hear an answer to. Where is comedy going, and is it changing, and what is it? It's like the Barbie. I don't know what Barbie is a huge hit. And is Barbie? What difference is Barbie from other movies? Is it a timing thing so much that people just want to laugh at
Well,
something, or I don't know. I think how
nostalgia.
people identify nostalgia. Yeah,
Yeah, I think it's great marketing.
It's all. Yeah,
Yeah, they did global marketing. You could just see things Middle East, Europe,
that's
they
true.
really rolled out a great marketing campaign. It became an event, right? That and Oppenheimer, they were sort of combining. You'd see a double feature of both. I think it's just people were, they made an event out of it, Of
It's
course,
amazing how they did. Yeah, I mean, there are two shows that are so opposite too, really, but they're each good shows, but a whole different. But yeah, no, I'm hearing what you're saying. I'm going to go on because I think you're nailing it better than I could.
it became a worldwide thing of people wanting to see this double feature. And obviously Barbie
Yeah.
benefited a lot more, made a lot more money, but it's also Oppenheimer was, I believe, close to or over 3 hours.
What's interesting with Barbie comedy, that show, based on a Barbie doll. Here we're doing a movie. You could fit that show could have bombed so easily. I mean, it depends on who handled it and how they handled it. Somehow they handled it because that easily could have been just
G.I. Joe kind
yeah,
of
it's
like,
not funny.
tried
Yeah, I
those.
mean,
Yeah.
it's certainly not a phenomenon like it is. So the question, yeah, for me is in kind of your question. What did they do? How did they handle that so it appealed to everybody across the board? And a lot of, I guess the actors too are, I mean, you got to get the
Sure.
right people in there, Ryan Gosling and but it all seemed to work, and everybody who sees it just seems to really
Yeah.
love
I
it.
mean, it's got legs, that's for sure. And even the next couple of weeks, it was still number one. So, I'm sure there'll be sequels and then it's going to come on to streaming and, it'll just continue to have a like there and continue to generate the revenue. Do you think, like, looking back on your careers, or is there a particular, project or accomplishment that even stands out or most fulfilling or rewarding to you over your entire career that may or may not be in the book, but
Well, what's rewarding to me is I just spent my daughter and two of my grandkids from back east to happen to live in Ohio now. We're out here and we all were together. And to me, is that my two daughters have grown up to be such good people and good mothers. They each have two. They got four grandkids. That to me is a great personal accomplishment. But also, I mentioned Nick and Devin, who, Bungie and Nick Stan are the two former students I mentioned who are doing the thing now. And knowing that I mean, these guys were good. I mean, I just happened to recognize that they were good and say, hey, why don't you write together? But that's a good accomplishment. And they're happily, each of these guys are married with two kids and they're family guys now. As far as the work, I think I mentioned in the book, like the Martin Luther King tribute that we managed to do, which I always kind of wanted to do, and a KKK episode that we done where, the Jeffersons,
CPR.
Georgia Jeffersons, and here's, Ku Klux Klan. How do you do that show? It was something, working with Norman, I always thought, what can we do? Like, Norman did rape on the show, with Edith, and how do you make that funny? But he managed, and I'm thinking, how do you got a black show here, primary black actors and all, and how do you do the KKK and make a statement about, and do you do the KKK or do you just call it white supremacy and we decided and somehow we got away with that. And I don't think you could do that today. And the Martin Luther King episode, Martin Luther King thing was basically my experience. I was alive then when Martin got shot, and I remember the feeling, and I remember the white people saying he was a communist and all this kind of stuff. And we were able to present all that, I think, in that show, the episode that we did. And yeah, I think those are both great shows. I don't know what awards they ever won or were nominated for, but I think I mentioned and quote Mark Twain in the book that Mark Twain said it's better to deserve an award and not get it than to get an award and not deserve it. So I always figured, I think that those shows, and not just because of me or my partner, but the actors, the director, everybody pulled together to make that show work, and the actors could be funny one minute and bring tears in their eyes and put tears in your eyes at the same time. That's what always was fascinating to me about All in the Family. I don't know how much you were too young probably to remember when that really, there was a disclaimer at the beginning, it's like, get your kids out of the room if you're going to watch
warning.
this or something.
Yeah.
But they would always, you'd be laughing one minute and then be tears in your eyes. Next minute you go, I didn't know a sitcom could make you do that. Or you get chills and going, whoa. Like there was an episode where it's basically Archie has a swastika put on his door. A guy there's a bomb blows up and blows this guy up, who we got to know at the end of the show. And it's like, really? I mean, who had the balls to be doing that show and make that comedy? But Norman you really got to, Norman's my idol when it comes to everything, basically. I mean, he's still alive, he just turned 101.
Yeah, that's crazy.
And he's still bright, he's still sharp, He visit him down, still has an office at Sony Pictures. They got the Norman Lear building there. When you look at his history and how he made that show happen, All in the Family, there were 3 pilots done, and before that show finally got, every network turned to do one at ABC. They did one finally, and he, giving some props to actors. Norman initially he offered that role to Mickey Rooney. Mickey Rooney from the old days.
Yeah.
So Mickey read the script. Norman will tell you, and he talks about himself in the first. Talks about himself in the third person. He said that. Norm, Mick can't say this stuff. So he said to Mick can't say. And Norman's like, he wasn't going to change anything, but he knew what he wanted to do. I mean, this was his dad. He was kind of basing this on. He knew how white people, everybody had a crazy uncle or a neighbor or whatever, and he was going to do a show about it. But when Carol O'Connor, as I understand, Carol to read the show and all that, Carol had his own notes and thoughts. And Norman said, Carol, you got to commit to the material if you're going to do the show or not. So he really stuck with that thing, and it's amazing, really. When you look back, and if Phil Rosenthal, who created Everybody Loves Raymond, describes TV as before Norman and after Norman, DN and AN, and that changed television. It really was. There's a coffee table book out now. It's called All in the Family, the show that changed television. And they take like 40 or 50 of the best shows, one of them being the Draft Dodger show where they interviewed Mike and I for it. But it is the show that changed television, I think. I don't know. Maybe I'm kind of curious on your take on the TV that and like what your favorite show is, or for TV watching, or what your kids watch for TV.
Yeah, I mean, I think for us, it's a lot of streaming now, with all the different platforms that go on with the, Amazon and Netflix and Apple TV and Paramount Plus and Peacock, and, so I think there's not really like, I remember in high school, college, there'd be like must-see TV where all these shows would be locked in a row, and Seinfeld would be like maybe the anchor, or Friends, or whatever was going on in that sort of time. And you sort of just watched like 4 shows in a row. Probably Frasier was part at some time, and prior to that, Cheers and certain series like that. But that to me was what my memories were the most of comedy, is watching like just a few in a row. And you wanted to tune in to see them all because they seemed to block them together. Especially, I felt like it was like Thursday nights on NBC always had this really like strong lineup that people would just, obviously Seinfeld would get so many viewers. And then when it sort of became like, okay, now you have kids, you're watching, a lot younger stuff. But you do see writers come nowadays and they'll throw in adult things into children's shows in the sense of jokes that the parents can appreciate as well. Or like a show like Modern Family that we watched, right? That was on, I think, 11 years, and that's kind of like blurring that line, edgy versus maybe some people find it controversial, some of the things they say, but it's more modern, no pun intended, but more modern day, where audiences are sort of, could they make it in 2023? I don't know. Some of the jokes they said a decade ago, but it's contemporary enough to where they still hold up, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Modern Family, I think, was a brilliant show. That was a single camera show that definitely was well written, well put together.
Yeah,
And,
well acted, well put together. I mean, yeah, the single family, but there's a lot of camera movement in it. It's not afraid to pan, it's not afraid to zoom in and out on things. And I think it creates sort of like movement to the show to kind of take away from it being just a single camera. That's a great point. I mean, I'm used to the 3-camera setup myself. And when I went to college, it was the same thing. When we would do, TV or film, whether broadcasting, you would certainly set up those 3-camera, camera 1, camera 2, and it just kind of just moves the pace. But I think those single families, if they can kind of, the DP or whoever, the camera operator can sort of bring some life to the scene by moving that camera around, it does sort of, at least for me, push it along and make it a little more sort of upbeat and just visually interesting to watch than just, okay, like you said, MASH, single camera. Okay. It's hard to transfer
like you said, they were in tune with the times, like the gay couple that gets married and has a kid, and they really deal with everything really well, and they were able to do the, like Office does with the talking heads, and you could, where they're doing a documentary at the same time, people are filming it and they could talk. Yeah, it was really, really a well done show. Any successful show, it's like catching lightning in a bottle. I mean, you have to get good directors, you have to get good actors, you have to get good writers, good children, and that's hard to do. It's not done with every.
No, that's why you get over a decade on the air. That's in itself is impossible. It seems to most shows. So I mean, that's definitely a testament of, like you said, the writing, the acting, the producing, just all together. Everyone sort of pulled together, and like I said, they weren't afraid to sort of push those boundaries. Like you said, this couple, they're gay, but they have an adopted daughter. Then this couple, and he's much older than she, and
right, exactly.
A lot going on, right? It worked, and like I said, it hasn't been that long since it's been off the air, but it definitely holds up. I just don't know.
Modern Family. It was a perfect name for it. But you mentioned 10. Jeffersons set a record. They were on 11 seasons, and that was the longest any sitcom had ever run. And I think since then, I don't know if MASH maybe won an episode more or something. I think then it was Jeffersons became the longest black show running on TV until Tyler Perry did. I think Tyler Perry with House of Pain, he did one more episode than the Jeffersons just so he could say it was the longest.
Oh no! No, I didn't know that. That's crazy. Yeah. Well, what's next for you? Like, is there anything that you're working on? Or are you just enjoying, seeing your grandkids and just enjoying, life, or do you still have an itch to?
Yeah, well, I'm definitely trying to grow old gracefully, basically, which I feel like it. But what I had planned, I think I mentioned to you at the beginning of September, here is going to Maui. But now Maui's, which kind of a second home for me, and my true companion. We've been going there for a while and looking forward but work-wise, I just finished seventh draft of a script that I've written. So I'm not working. I'm not doing anything hard or that I'm necessarily going to get paid for, but I still, try to keep like the book I wrote another book too that's basically a screenplay called Deadeye. It's dedicated to everybody who wanted to be a cowboy. I grew up watching cowboys, like Lone Ranger and Roy Rogers and Gene Autry and all those kind of things. There was a time in the 50s and early 60s when that was all that was on TV. It was all these cowboy shows. Adults watched them, Roy Rogers. And every kid, he was the king of the cowboys. He's what I wanted to be. In fact, I have a picture in the book with him and Dale Evans, was... If you're interested in cowboy shows, this book called Deadeye is basically a screenplay. I wrote it in book form, and it almost came close to getting made over the years, but hasn't been yet. So my thinking is, when I'm gone, some director's gonna pick up the book and say, this is kind of, and this has it's like a tribute to the cowboy shows. It's about a guy who's like a young lawyer, and he's going through a divorce, and everything's miserable. He hates being a lawyer, hates his job. The only thing he ever really wanted to do was a cowboy, so he just takes off to be a cowboy. It's a little crazy, but it's like Don Quixote, in his mind he starts to be like a cowboy. He goes out west and It occurs during the 70s when everybody out west did wear cowboy hats still, and it was real. He just kind of creates his own reality, in like three scenes, three acts through the movie. It becomes like a cowboy show, you know. I mean, it becomes really, he's created, like I said, it's a lot of, I didn't even realize at the time, but it's kind of Don Quixote kind of thing. Anyway.
That's that's awesome. I mean, is there, so besides this book, well, besides your book, right, Honky in the House, is this, I got this on Amazon. What, is there any other, where do you suggest that people listening?
Well, Amazon, you can get anything I write on Amazon, you know, that today, which is great. In the old days, you had to get stuff on shelves, you know, but now it's everybody buys on Amazon. I wish I had the book. Well, I have it. I'm not going to run the other room, but it's Deadeye. It's called Deadeye. If you put my name, Jay Moriarty.
I'll put it in the show notes. So
put it in Amazon. They'll see. But yeah, it's actually. I mean, it's comedy. It's all the things that you used to find, because he knows from all the Lone Ranger, the things the Lone Ranger used to do, and Tano, and the things that Roy did, and the things that, you know, every cowboy did something different. And the Hopalong Cassidy and Cisco Kid and all those guys. It combines all that. So especially if you grew up watching it, because you really don't have to. Just like you didn't have to grow up with a Barbie doll to see Barbie and
right.
Be amused and have fun with it. You know.
Is there a way for people to follow your work, or is it, you know, just Google search?
Well, you know, on Facebook, I do have, and I you know, you fall in and out of Facebook. I haven't been doing a lot, but I do have a Jeffersons page, and I do have a Deadeye page. So the Deadeye Western thing, in fact, like if I put up a picture of a Roy Rogers lunchbox or something, you'd be surprised at all the hits you get. And people, yeah, I had one like that, and my brother, and I remember my mom used to put my Hostess cupcakes in the. You know, I have a Facebook page, my regular Facebook page. There's also an author page, which is a basic, and then there's a Jeffersons page and a Deadeye page. So the Jeffersons has all about the Honky book and stuff, and the Deadeye page has Deadeye and cowboys. And you know, when I was a kid growing up, you don't know from all the stuff, but there was every kid in the 50s had a picture, male and female, of picture with a cowboy hat on and guns. You know, they always had the guns. But for Christmas or your birthday, that's what you wanted. And I had a number of pictures of both girl and boy. Who, in fact, Nancy, my true companion, she's has her picture with the cowboy stuff on. But
oh wow,
in the 50s, everybody was you wanted to be a cowboy. You know, birthday parties, everybody, the kids dressed up like cowboys, because the cowboy thing was, they were morality plays, you know, and the good guys always won. You know, the good guys wore the white hats, and the bad guys, they all had dark clothes on and rode dark horses. The stars would ride the golden palominos and those kind of things. But it was always a morality. It was like, remember Davy Crockett was really big in the 50s. Everybody had a coonskin cap. But Davy Crockett, his motto was, "Be sure you're right, then go ahead." You know. So morality was real simple in those days. You know, you got God, you got the flag, you got the country, and you just do. And I think that's what spurred on the '60s too. The baby boomers then, who learned from Davy Crockett, "Be sure you're right, then go ahead." And they were like, there shouldn't be any war. You know, all we're saying is give peace a chance, and that became a big. And then the racial strife was, how come there's segregation and trying to, we know this is right even though the law says this, right? You know, that ended up in '68 with the Democratic Convention in '68. So all this action before you were even born.
Yeah. No, it's like it's crazy how time flies and how much happens, but it's like. This career you've had, it's been very fascinating to listen to the stories of how you've woven so many of your personal beliefs, attitudes, feelings into writing, which helped people just enjoy these great shows and laugh and feel emotion, which is, like you said, something you don't really get from most sitcoms out there. So it's been, an amazing career. I mean, I think I want to read Deadeye.
Yeah.
if that's online.
I'll be happy
And
to send you a copy if you
no,
tell me where to send it. Just tell me.
no,
your
no, no.
number, and
I'll go on Amazon like everyone should,
it's only
and
like $15 or something, but
yeah, exactly. Yeah, thank you so much for taking the time today to do this podcast. Again, Amazon, look for your book, Honky in the House.
that's nice of you to say.
Yeah.
I wrote this book because when I came out here, yes, I wish there was something I could read to find out what goes on. How do you get into comedy? How does this business work? How does the Writers Guild work? And I wrote a book now that I wish I had, or the young people today could read, and they could see. I just told them what it was from a writer's perspective, Even the guild, which is, when my partner and I started, it was like, well, now we got to pay what? Initiation. We didn't understand about pension and health, It was like,
Right.
and picketing, we went through all the strikes, which are happening right now. You see the writers and the actors striking. But anyway, what I strive to do is, by telling my story, is to tell other people how it works and how they can do the same kind of thing if you stick with it. It's about perseverance, it's about really sticking with something you want to do. And then it almost surprises me when I look back. My book's basically what happened to me in my 20s, and I look back and I don't know how this kid. To me, it's like somebody else, and I, like third person. How did this guy do this stuff? And how was he so sure that he was going to end up, not on the streets or something? I think I mentioned in the book early on that if I ever got in my life where I could afford enough money to hire somebody to cut my grass so I didn't have to cut my own grass and have access to a swimming pool, I'd be a happy guy. And that's what I have today. We have a great gardener and we got a swimming pool in the back, plus a jacuzzi. So I'm a happy guy. And I really enjoyed talking to you, and I hope to see more of you around.
Yeah, we'll do this again.
Personal friend.
Yeah, maybe talk about the next book. Maybe if you have time to come back, we could talk about your next book and see how everything's going. Check in a little while and have some fun.
That would be terrific.